Welcome to the Hindu Daily. We're diving deep into today's sources, starting with the really complex geopolitical situation in West Asia. There's this perception, isn't there, of Israel's regional dominance. After recent military actions, Gaza, Assad's overthrow, hitting Iran's nuclear program hard, it paints a picture of, well, hegemony.
It does look that way on the surface. But the sources, they argue we might be seeing the limits of that military power. Its failure to translate into actual political sustainability.
Okay, so how does that play out? The sources mention Israel being like a colossus with feet of clay. What's the first sign of that weakness?
Well, look at the recent Gaza ceasefire, the one brokered or maybe imposed by President Trump. The rhetoric was tough on Hamas, sure, but if you dig into the plan itself, it was actually a significant imposition on Israel, on Tel Aviv.
Right, but Trump was publicly, threatening Hamas with serious consequences. How does that end up pressuring Israel?
Because it forced Israel to stop. They were doing almost all the fighting, and this plan basically mandated a ceasefire. A partial withdrawal, too, pulling Israeli forces back to new lines inside Gaza. And crucially, Prime Minister Netanyahu had to publicly walk back his stated goal of completely destroying Hamas. That didn't happen.
So what did Hamas give up?
Hostages. They agreed to release Israeli hostages, but in return for over 1,000 Palestinian prisoners. And here's the key bit. Hamas didn't agree to disarm.
So they remain a force on the ground.
Exactly. They're still there, still governing in some capacity. So that military win for Israel, it reveals the immediate limits. It's more like a strategic stalemate, really.
Okay, so that's the immediate picture. But the sources also talk about a much longer-term challenge, almost existential demographics. What happens if you look at the idea of greater Israel, including the West Bank and Gaza?
Right. That vision creates an instant binational state. Inside the 67 borders, you've got 9 million Israelis, but that includes 2 million Palestinians already.
Wow.
Now add the 6 million plus Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza. Suddenly, Greater Israel is almost an even 50-50 split, Jews and Palestinians.
That demographic reality sounds incredibly challenging. Is there any way out described, or is it just these two stark choices?
The sources really paint it as an existential dilemma. No easy options. Path 1, accept it. Become a binational democratic state, equal rights for everyone. But that fundamentally changes the Zionist ideal of a Jewish state.
Okay, so the end of the original vision. What's path 2?
Formalize what many say is already happening, acknowledge apartheid. But doing that openly invites massive international condemnation, isolation. Think South Africa under Afrikaner rule. That makes any kind of regional hegemony completely unsustainable.
And you mentioned isolation. That's already starting to bite, isn't it? Even with former partners like the Gulf states.
Absolutely. The Abraham Accords were driven partly by Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, seeing Israel as a useful check on Iran. Now, they're unnerved.
By what specifically?
The sources say they see Israel as a power drunk actor that has run amok. Maybe they quietly liked seeing Hezbollah weakened, but the scale of devastation in Gaza the figures cited are staggering. 67,000 Palestinians killed, many thousands women and children, bombing, bullets, even starvation policies.
That's hard to ignore.
It is. And Gulf regimes worry. They worry that the popular anger across the Arab world could destabilize their own rule if they seem too close to an overly aggressive Israel.
And wasn't there a specific incident that really fractured trust?
Yes, a really critical one. The attempt to assassinate Hamas negotiators by bombing Doha back in September 2025.
In Qatar.
Exactly. Apparently it broke an earlier promise not to target Hamas officials there. That single act convinced Gulf leaders that Israel just couldn't be trusted as a partner. It's pushed back any chance of Saudi normalization by years, according to the analysis.
Okay, and the final piece of this puzzle, Washington. U.S. support has always been the bedrock, right?
Yeah.
But American public opinion seems to be shifting.
Dramatically. It's never been quite like this. A Pew poll found nearly 60% of Americans hold negative views of the Israeli government. And look at American Jews specifically. A Washington Post poll, 61% believe Israel committed war crimes in Gaza. 40% believe genocide was committed. That kind of shift, it's profound.
And that will eventually filter up to policymakers.
It almost certainly has to, especially, considering Trump's more transactional foreign policy approach. U.S. strategic interests might start outweighing unquestioning support down the line. It makes the hegemony look very, very fragile indeed.
That theme of control, or the limits of it, echoes in our next piece, shifting focus to India and the Great Nicobar Island. There's this huge mega plan proposed power plant port Airport Township.
Huge is right. In fact, think something like 13,000 hectares of forest. And this isn't just any forest, it's a global biodiversity hotspot.
So the conflict here centers on land use and environmental protection versus development. But there's a crucial legal angle involving the Forest Rights Act, the FRA.
Yes, the FRA from 2006. The whole project's legal standing seems to hang on how that act is applied. And there's a very important precedent, the Nyamburi Hills case from 2013.
Okay, tell us about Nyamburi. What did the Supreme Court decide there?
The court basically affirmed the power of the local communities, the Gram Sabhas. In that specific case, it was the Dongoria Khan tribe. They ruled that these communities had the absolute right to vote unanimously against a bauxite mining project proposed for their sacred hills. It established that their consent, their right to protect their culture and resources, is non-negotiable before any forest land gets degraded.
So community consent is paramount under the FRA. But the current situation in Great Nicobar suggests that step might have been missed.
That's the core accusation, yes. A report emerged saying the Tribal Council of Little and Great Nicobar claims the administration misrepresented the situation to the central government.
How so?
They allegedly told the center that the tribal rights under the FRA had been settled before the land diversion happened. But the council says no, those rights were not properly identified and settled. Which, if true, means they bypassed the entire legal requirement set by Nyamburi.
This kind of challenge, where existing environmental laws seem insufficient, has led some places to explore a more radical idea. Rights of nature. What is that exactly?
It's a fascinating concept, sometimes called earth jurisprudence. The basic idea is to grant legal personhood actual legal rights to natural entities themselves. Think rivers, forests, ecosystems.
Like a person or a company has rights.
Exactly. It comes from thinkers like Christopher Stone back in the 70s, who argued that current environmental law only really offers remedies for harm done to humans because of environmental damage.
Right.
Rights of nature says the river itself or the forest itself has the right to exist, to flourish, and can have legal guardians appointed to sue on its behalf for its own protection.
Has India experimented with this at all?
There have been attempts, yes. The Uttarakhand High Court famously granted legal personhood to the Ganges and Yamuna rivers and their glaciers back in 2017.
Oh, I remember that.
Now, that ruling was stayed by the Supreme Court, so it didn't fully stick. But the core idea assigning guardianship responsibilities, that concept, remains really potent and significant.
Are there international examples we can look to?
Definitely. Colombia is a key one. Their constitutional court recognized rights for the Atrato River in 2016. And importantly, they linked it to biocultural rights.
Biocultural rights.
Yeah, the idea that the rights of the river are intertwined with the rights of the local ethnic communities who depend on it. They have the right to administer and protect their territory autonomously. The ruling even mandated including indigenous representatives in the guardianship commission for the river. It's a much more holistic approach.
Okay, let's pivot now to a completely different legal arena. Yeah. India's own legal services market. For a long time, India seemed like an unlikely place for big international commercial disputes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. If you'd said that 10, 15 years ago, people would have been skeptical. But things have shifted dramatically. You just saw the India Alternative Dispute Resolution Week recently, attracting top global lawyers. It signals a major change.
But what was the old system like? Why was it so closed off?
Well, historically, it was quite insular. Back in 2009, the Bombay High Court basically said foreign law firms couldn't even do corporate advisory work, let alone litigation.
Right.
Then the Supreme Court weighed in 2018. They sort of harmonized things slightly, allowing foreign lawyers to fly in, fly out for temporary advice on foreign law, but setting up permanent offices, strictly forbidden.
That sounds like straight-up protectionism. Was the concern about the quality of Indian lawyers?
Yeah.
Because you had figures like Sir Benegal Rao, Fali Nariman, internationally respected names?
No, it wasn't about ability at all. Everyone recognized the talent. The concern, as the sources put it, was purely economic and strategic. Indian law firms back then were relatively small, fragmented. The fear was that big global law firms would just come in and, well, muscle them out.
Okay, so the delay was deliberate to let the domestic industry grow.
Exactly. And uniquely, Indian law firms grew organically, without foreign direct investment. They scaled up naturally over time.
And now, have they reached a point where they can compete?
It seems so. You now have Indian firms with over 1,000 lawyers, significant global exposure, lawyers with dual qualifications, even opening their own offices abroad. The landscape has totally changed.
Which brings us to the Bar Council of India's new framework, the 2025 rules. What do they allow now?
They allow foreign firms and lawyers to finally set up shop in India. They can advise on their home country's law, on international law, and significantly, they can appear in international arbitrations that are seated in India.
But there are limits, right? They can't just practice any law.
Correct. Very important limits. They cannot practice Indian law. They cannot appear in Indian courts, tribunals, or regulatory bodies unless they actually enroll as Indian advocates, which is a whole separate process.
And what's the key safeguard built into this opening up?
The absolute cornerstone is reciprocity. It's the magic word here.
Meaning?
Meaning, foreign firms from country X can only operate in India if country X grants Indian lawyers and law firms the exact same rights and privileges in their jurisdiction. It has to be a two-way street.
So it's not a complete opening of the floodgates.
Not at all. The sources describe it as finding Aristotle's golden mean. It's neither reckless, throwing the doors wide open, nor is it defensively insular, keeping everyone out. It's a very cautious, measured, deliberate step forward, governed entirely by that principle of equal access.
Let's move from the legal world to the abstract realm of higher mathematics. A huge honor recently, the Abel Prize, often called the Nobel of Math, went to Japanese mathematician Masaki Kashiwara.
Yes, a truly towering figure. And what's amazing is that the work that essentially won him this prize started when he was just 23 years old. His contributions are in algebraic analysis and representation theory, very fundamental stuff.
Okay, let's try and unpack that. Algebraic analysis, what's the core idea? He used something called D-modules.
Right. Think of D-modules as, well, advanced algebraic tools. Kashiwara used them to study systems of partial differential equations, these incredibly complex equations that describe physical phenomena. Instead of trying to solve each equation individually, which is often impossible, he used algebra to understand the structure and behavior of the entire system.
And this helped solve a famous problem.
Yes, the Riemann-Hilbert correspondence. It was one of Hilbert's famous 23 problems from 1900. Kashiwara proved it using D-modules by 1980.
Okay, so what is the Riemann-Hilbert correspondence? It involves something called monodromy.
Monodromy is the key concept. Imagine you have a differential equation with a singularity, a point where the math gets tricky. Now, imagine tracing a solution to the equation in a loop around that singularity.
Okay.
When you come back to your starting direction, the solution itself might have changed. It's like walking one full circle on a spiral staircase. You end up directly above where you started on a different level. That change or shift after looping the singularity is the monodromy.
I think I follow. Like a twist.
Exactly. So Hilbert's question was, if you know the singularities and you know the monodromy effect around them, can you uniquely figure out the original differential equation that produces them? Can you go backwards?
And Kashiwara showed you could, using these algebraic methods.
He did. He built heavily on the work of his advisor, Mikio Sato, who really pioneered this whole field of algebraic analysis starting back in 1959. Sato's big idea was, let's stop banging our heads against solving every single equation. Let's use algebra to understand the system's properties. Kashiwara developed the powerful machinery, the D-modules, to actually do that for general systems.
The sources mentioned he created a kind of dictionary. What does that mean?
That's a great way to put it. He essentially reformulated the Riemann-Hilbert correspondence. He showed it was equivalent to a direct link, a dictionary between two different kinds of mathematical objects, D-modules on the algebra analysis side, and something called perverse sheaves on the topology geometry side.
So translating between different mathematical languages.
Precisely. It created this incredible bridge connecting algebra, analysis, and topology. It means mathematicians can tackle a problem in one area using tools and insights from a completely different area, all thanks to this dictionary Kashiwara built. It's incredibly powerful.
And his work wasn't just in analysis, right? Representation theory, too.
Yes. Later in his career, another major breakthrough. Representation theory is vital for quantum physics, among other things. It's about simplifying complex structures. Kashiwara invented something called crystal bases around 1990.
Crystal bases?
Yeah, it sounds cool, doesn't it? He found a way to, roughly speaking, turn the complex algebraic structures of quantum groups into combinatorial objects, like graphs. This makes calculations that were previously impossibly complex much, much easier and reveals deeper structure. Just another example of him building bridges between mathematical worlds.
Fascinating stuff. Now, staying with science, but shifting to biology, let's talk about a truly remarkable creature. the naked mole rat.
Ah, yes, the Methuselah of the rodent world.
Exactly. They live up to 37 years, which is almost 10 times longer than mice or other mammals their size. Scientists have long suspected their secret lies in really efficient DNA repair.
And this new study zooms in on a specific molecule called cGAS. That's cGAS, cyclic GMP-AMP synthase.
What does cGAS normally do? In humans, for instance.
In us and in mice, cGAS is crucial for the immune system. It detects foreign DNA, like from a virus, and triggers an alarm. That's the good part.
But there's a downside.
A big one, it turns out. cGAS also actively suppresses a key DNA repair pathway called homologous recombination. By hindering this repair process, our own cGAS actually contributes to aging and increases cancer risk over time.
So it's like a double-edged sword, fights infection but accelerates wear and tear.
You got it. Now, the amazing finding in this study is that the naked mole rat seems to have flipped the script. Its version of cGAS does the opposite. It enhances homologous recombination.
Wow. How? What's different about the mole rat's cGAS?
It comes down to just 4 specific amino acid changes in the protein structure. Tiny tweaks, huge difference.
And what do those 4 changes actually do?
They make the mole rat cGAS bind much more tightly and for much longer to damaged DNA sites. In humans, cGAS gets flagged for destruction quickly after binding. In the mole rat, it sticks around.
Okay, so it stays put longer. Why does that help repair?
Because while it's stuck there, it acts like a beacon, or maybe a scaffold. It actively recruits key repair proteins, specifically FNCI and RAD50 are mentioned to the damaged site much more effectively. This speeds up the repair process, makes it more efficient, and reduces cellular stress.
That's incredible. And the implications for us, for human aging.
Potentially huge. The researchers actually managed to modify human cGAS in the lab. They introduced those same 4 amino acid changes from the mole rat, and it stopped the human cGAS from suppressing DNA repair. It started behaving more like the mole rat version.
So we could, theoretically, tweak our own cGAS.
That's the hope. This discovery is really important because it shows longevity isn't just about having better repair enzymes. It can also evolve by weakening or repurposing molecules that are actually harmful. It opens up totally new avenues for research into therapies targeting cGAS to perhaps slow down aging or reduce age-related diseases.
Let's turn now to the complexities of politics, specifically in Bihar's Seemanchal region. There's often this assumption, especially with the rise of parties like AMIM, that the Muslim population there, which is significant, nearly 28% votes as a single bloc.
Yeah, that en bloc idea is common simplification, but the sources we looked at show it's really not accurate at all for Seemanchal. The reality on the ground is far more fragmented, based on deep internal divisions.
Divisions based on what?
Primarily caste and also religious denomination within Sunni Islam. You have 3 main Muslim caste groups there: the Surjapuri, the Shurshobadi, and the Kuhaya.
And these groups are distinct.
Very distinct, culturally different, they rarely intermarry, and they even speak different dialects. The sources emphasize how deep these lines run, even though outsiders often lump them all together.
And you mentioned denominational splits, too. How did that layer in?
It often aligns with the caste groups, adding another layer of identity. So the Surjapuris, who are the largest group numerically, around 24.5 lakh, tend to follow Barelvi traditions, which are more embracing of Sufi practices.
Okay.
The Kuhayas, about 12.5 lakh, are predominantly Deobandi, which is generally seen as more reformist. And the Shoshabadis, around 13 lakh, mostly adhere to the Ahl Hadith movement, which emphasizes strict reliance on the Quran and Hadith.
So caste and religious practice are intertwined. And how does the state categorize them politically?
That's another interesting wrinkle. Historically, they might have all identified as sheikh, suggesting upper caste status. But due to socioeconomic backwardness, the Shurshobadis and the Kulhayas were eventually included in Bihar's extremely backward classes, or EBC category.
But not the Surjapuris.
No, the Surjapuris remain classified under the backward caste category. So you have different official statuses, too, despite shared religion.
When did these internal community differences really start to matter at the ballot box? When did voting become explicitly caste-based?
The sources suggest the shift really began around the year 2000, and things had pretty much stabilized along caste lines by 2010. Before that, candidates from non-dominant castes could sometimes win.
But then it changed. Give us an example.
Kishanganj Lok Sabha seat is a classic case. It's heavily Surjapuri dominated. It apparently took a very prominent Surjapuri leader, Maulana Azrarul Haqqi Kazmi, 24 long years to finally win that seat. He only succeeded in 2009 when, the analysis suggests, Srdjapuri voters collectively mobilized behind him as a Srdjapuri leader, overcoming the incumbent, who was from the Kuhaya community.
So that established a kind of caste dominance in that particular seat.
Exactly, to the point where the sources say it's now considered almost impossible for a non-Srdjapuri candidate to win Kishanganj.
And does this pattern hold in the assembly seats too?
It largely does. The analysis points out that the Shir-Shabadi community, despite its numbers, has gone from having 2 MLAs to now having 0. Conversely, certain assembly seats are seen as Kuhaya strongholds, like Jokihat or Araria, while others, like Kochadaman and Balrampur, are reliably Srdjapuri. The caste equation seems quite entrenched now in many places.
So where does a party like AIMIM fit in? Its leader there is Srdjapuri, right?
Yes, Akhtarul Iman is Srdjapuri, and AIMIM's strategy seems to recognize these divisions. They appear to be trying to build a coalition, specifically trying to unite Srdjapuri and Kulhaya voters.
How are they doing that?
Well, for instance, running a Kulhaya candidate in one seat, Basi, while Iman himself contests the neighboring Srdjapuri-dominated Amur seat. It looks like a clear attempt to combine the strengths of these two larger groups, directly playing into and perhaps trying to reshape these established local caste equations.
Okay, finally today, let's look at a high-profile corporate story involving Elon Musk and the aftermath of his Twitter acquisition. There was a big lawsuit filed by former executives.
That's right. Former CEO Parag Agrawal, CFO Ned Segal, Chief Legal Officer Vijay Gadi, and General Counsel Sean Edgett. They sued Musk for about $128 million after he fired them almost immediately upon taking over in October 2022.
And that lawsuit has now been settled.
Yes. News came out that a settlement was reached on October 1st, filed in the U.S. Northern District Court of California.
What was the core of their argument? Why did they claim they were fired?
They alleged it wasn't for performance or gross negligence, as Musk might have implied. They claimed it was personal, driven by Musk's personal grudge and special ire, particularly because they had held him to the original acquisition deal when he tried to back out.
Right, his biography even mentioned him vowing a lifetime of revenge against some folks involved.
Exactly. They pointed to things like that. Their legal argument was that he fired them for cause, pretextually, essentially making up reasons.
To avoid paying their severance.
Precisely. To avoid paying out substantial severance benefits, especially their stock options, which were due to vest upon the change of control. They claimed this saved Musk personally, or his company, nearly $200 million.
And they argued that severance isn't just a golden parachute, it serves a purpose.
Yes, that was a key part of their case. They argued that these kinds of severance packages are crucial in acquisitions because they ensure executives prioritize shareholder interests during the sale process, rather than worrying about their own jobs under a new owner.
So firing them without proper cause and denying severance, they argued, was essentially punishing them for doing their jobs for the shareholders.
That was the essence of it, yes. Punishing them for making him go through with the deal he'd agreed to.
And now it's settled. Do we know the terms? The amount?
No, the exact sum and the conditions of the settlement haven't been disclosed publicly. That's typical in these kinds of cases. But the bottom line is the litigation is over, assuming the court approves the settlement and the conditions are met over time.
Interesting to see where these executives landed afterwards, too. They didn't just disappear.
No, they certainly didn't. Parag Agrawal, for example, started a new company called Parallel, working on AI and web search tech. And Ned Segal took on a pretty major civic role, didn't he?
Yeah, Chief of Housing and Economic Development for San Francisco.
Yeah.
A significant pivot back into public service, or at least civic leadership. Shows there's definitely life after a very public, very acrimonious exit like that.
Absolutely. A quick transition back into influential positions.
Thank you for listening. If you want to provide suggestions, please contact on the Twitter handle given in the episode description. As always, we are eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.